Okay, good morning everybody. I'm going to try again to make this video. I did upload the video that I made before. If you want to watch that, I was kind of thinking about what I want to talk about, but it didn't, for some reason my phone overheated or something, so it didn't work out. So I want to talk today about an organization called the New Israel Fund. The reason why I came to mind to discuss it was because one of my rabbis wrote about it on Facebook, and I felt like this was something I wanted to talk about. For a few years I've been somewhat following them, not that much, but paying them some attention on their email list, but I don't always get their emails because now Gmail, like, they put promotions and the different things, so I don't always read the promotions. And I think that goes under the promotions folder. But it's a left-wing organization in Israel, and I make it pretty clear that I'm pretty much a right-wing person, liberal in my approach to government, which is, it's often been said that the only place of classical liberalism today is in the American right. And it makes me think about how Bono has often said that America is an idea and not just a place, and it's an idea that the people from this place have shared throughout the world. I kind of wanted to, it's a little bit off subject, but this type of thing of how President Obama changed the name of Mount McKinley to the indigenous name of Denali. And, I think it reflects the left's view that essentially countries are local instead of ideas. It really goes back to certain ancient problems that still exist to a certain extent. We study what the Bible teaches about the Samaritans, how they developed from the Kuthians. And it's something I work, like I said, in a prison, and I'm the head of the religion department there, and I for all different religions. So I was talking to someone who's an Odinist, and I was respectful to him, and it just was fascinating to me how he described. I told him, I had heard that Odinism, some people label as being racist, and this guy said, he used to be a skinhead, and now he has respect for other, nationalities and so forth, and that, here he's embracing the folk religion of his ancestry, but he doesn't believe that that's universal. He respects, for example, how the Native Americans have their native folk religion, and the Aborigines in Australia have their native folk religion, and so forth. And to kind of, and even though he didn't say it in so many words, but he could look at Judaism as the native folk religion of the Jews. The problem that we have with that from a biblical standpoint is that we believe that Judaism, that the biblical God is the God of the universe. We don't believe that there are local gods. That, you have to worship the local gods the way that many of the folk religions believe. And that's actually, it's recorded in the Bible that, the Kuthians were brought by Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, when he had this project, which was done later by the communists, a very similar approach of just moving people around, which really, to a certain extent, had a certain benefit. And that benefit was eliminating some of the racist issues of the Bible, because we don't know anymore who's an Amalekite, who's a Moabite, who's an Egyptian, who's an Ammonite, who's an Edomite. All of these different nations were moved, and so therefore any racial issue that Deuteronomy set forth doesn't apply today, because these nations no longer exist. And so it's a positive thing to eliminate, I believe, to be able to be welcoming. And I think that's part of God's plan, even though God did write it in the Bible. But I would say that, the plan all along was like this. And even before that, we see how, the book of Ruth, teaches that, here's a Moabite woman who was welcomed into the community. And so the rabbis explain, well, when the Bible says it's a Moabite cannot bring in, Hebrew is a gendered language, and so therefore a Moabite male is the one who can't come in, but not the Moabitess, not the female Moabite. Moavi v'lo Moaviyah. And then later in the Mishnah, there was, a Ger Moavi. There was a man who came along, he converted, and he claimed a Moabite heritage, and he was welcomed because essentially it said, how do we know you're really a Moabite? Just because you come from the Moabite territory doesn't make you a Moabite, doesn't mean that you can prove Moabite ancestry. You don't have proof through witnesses of your Moabite ancestry, and so therefore we're not strict to say, well, maybe everyone's a Moabite and we can't welcome anybody. No, just the opposite. We say, since it's a matter of doubt and we don't know, and it's a minority matter of doubt, meaning that the most likely you're not a Moabite, and so therefore that's it. You're not a Moabite, and you're welcome to. The Moabites were always welcome to convert. The question is, could they marry someone born Jewish? Were they mutalava b'kahal? And the answer is, we try our best to be as welcoming as possible within the realm of halacha. And it's one of the beauties of how halacha works, how Judaism works. It's not a religion that's solo scriptura. The concept of having traditions and so forth, oral traditions, help us to be more welcoming. That's the part of the idea. Help us to be more just. Help us to follow the clear ideology of the Bible, the spirit of the law within the letter of the law, through the oral traditions and through the teachings of the rabbis, and how the rabbis read the Bible. That made it possible for us to live, because otherwise we would live in a Taliban society. People would be poking each other's eyes out, eye for an eye. That's part of the issue. But putting that aside, I wanted to discuss this New Israel Fund, this left-wing organization, which on the surface would sound like something that I would be happy with, but even for a long time I had feelings there's certain things that I'm uncomfortable with. And then they revealed who they really are. And it also comes back to issues of semantics and how we define certain words in our vocabulary, certain political ideas. And one of the most difficult political ideas, really, it's a simple and obvious, straightforward idea, but one that's been so twisted by the left, is religious freedom. And what is religious freedom? What's religious freedom really about? What's the idea of religious freedom? And there's a question of the difference between freedom of religion and freedom from religion. Now, within religious freedom, there is aspects of both. But the issue is really freedom in general, and liberty and freedom in general. That's what the American ideal was founded on, and that's what I think so much more of the world wishes they had. When you hear someone like Bono who comes from England, which doesn't have this concept enshrined in their ideology of their nationhood, as much as England has so many wonderful things to offer, they're missing out on something, in that they lack the Jeffersonian ideal of religious freedom, even though so much of what we have, it's come from so many of our traditions and so forth, and our ideas have come from the British tradition. and so much of the British tradition, they are the people of the Brit. They are the British people. They're a covenanted people. Their royalty, whether it's true or not from a biological standpoint, doesn't matter, but they claim that their ancestry goes back to our, Israelite kings, our Jewish kings, back to King David, that they claim a divine right of the monarchy through King David, actually. Whether that's true or not is immaterial. The point is that they have, embraced so many ideas. Like the Gemara tells us the story of Shmai and Avtalion, or the Gedolei Hador. They were the greatest rabbis of their generation, and they were actually descendants of Sennacherib, of Sennacherib, who we just mentioned, the wicked king of Assyria, who still Hezekiah had the foresight and wisdom to try to make a peace treaty with, much like our very wise president is attempting to make a deal with North Korea, with a very wicked and evil regime. It's a level of recognition, of understanding of reality and pragmatism, and as much as how President Trump is willing to sit at a table and talk to an evil man like Kim Jong-un, who's a very evil man. He's the embodiment of evil, and yet pragmatism of understanding that, just like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was willing to meet with Vespasian, a wicked man who destroyed our temple, and yet Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had the pragmatism to sit down and meet with him and make a deal with him, and ask for the Kerem B'Yavna, ask for the vineyard in Yavna. I've heard Yavna is Jamiza or Jamina in Greek, I guess, or something. The Council of Jamina or something is what they talk about. In Yavna, it's where the Sanhedrin was. And so much of Judaism was preserved because of this pragmatism of being willing to meet even with enemies in order to make peace. Just like Yaakov Avinu with Esav, and so too the Neturei Karta, even if I disagree with their approach to how they deal with some of our rabbis, and I oppose them for that reason, and I disagree with them on many other issues. Still, all that being said, this work of going and meeting with our enemies and trying to broker peace is a very positive thing, because we can turn enemies into friends sometimes if we're willing to give peace a chance. And it's very inspiring to see President Trump is working on that right now. And maybe he'll do the same with Iran, and it's quite refreshing and quite incredible. And if he's successful, he definitely deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, he deserves it more than Obama, who never did anything, and just because he got elected, and just because his father was from Africa, and his father was one of these African warlords, the same type of people who enslaved the future African Americans. I mean, people forget that slavery wasn't really a racial issue as much as it was an issue of how warlords in Africa, when they would fight with other nations and they would conquer another nation in Africa, another tribe, and they would win, and they would enslave the other people and sell them to whoever was looking to buy slaves. It wasn't really, and so it's totally fitting for President Obama to have been part of the Democratic Party, because he comes from the slave-holding stock and slave-owning and enslaving stock, meaning the white men never enslaved anybody. They bought slaves from black people, like Obama's father, like Obama's family heritage, really. And so it's totally fitting that he was part of the Democratic Party, that was the party of slavery, the party of the KKK, the party of Jim Crow, because it really has nothing to do so much with race, although it developed into something about race in America. Essentially, that wasn't really the issue as much for someone like the Obama family. Those were the people who were really responsible for slavery more than anyone else, those type of the warlords in Africa. But that's neither here nor there. Let's put that aside for now. But so too, this phenomenon of President Obama changing the name from Mount McKinley to Denali, because to him, America is just the land of the, whatever native tribe that was living there at the time, and that's who it belongs to. And it's not the idea of a world-changing concept. Much of how biblical religions, the Judeo-Christian tradition, transformed the world. Basically, the ideas of Judaism were spread through Christianity and through Islam throughout the world and transformed the world, and in a sense unified the world under certain core concepts, even though we develop back into certain levels of tribalism. And it's interesting how post-presidential Obama is talking about tribalism when he was a man who encouraged tribalism. He didn't go away from tribalism. He embraced tribalism much more. President Trump is the opposite. President Trump is not embracing tribalism. President Trump is embracing a more of universalism. And the idea of the American ideal, where we can still maintain our individual tribes without killing each other. Where, President Trump has respect for other nations, even though they're totally different than ours, because he understands the common humanity that we share. And so that's why he could be able to sit at a table with people who are totally different, and which was something that President Obama was never able to do. President Obama just went into his bubble chamber or whatever, his echo chamber, and only wanted to hear voices that were similar to his. And so it's a very refreshing turn, what's going on now in America. The restoration of America back to its roots. And similarly, this is an issue in general. Like I said, the Odinist who harkens back to his ancient folk religions, and so the human race is much more divided, and how every group believes that they are the descendants of their gods, as opposed to the Judeo-Christian idea that we were all made in the image of God, and that we're all the children of Adam and Eve, and we're all the children of Noah, and so we're all one family. And that's one of the great lessons of Judaism, and by extension Christianity and Islam, which accept this idea as well. And it goes away from the tribalism. And Judaism was never intended to be tribalistic, and yet the left harkens back time and again away from the theistic center of Judaism, the godliness of Judaism, the scriptural anchor of Judaism. They forget about that and embrace instead the tribalism. And that's the problem with a group like the New Israel Fund. Because the New Israel Fund is not looking to eliminate Israel from being a Jewish state, but rather looking to redefine Jewishness away from religion, which is a universal concept that anyone from any race can embrace, and that we share so much in common with Christians and Muslims, our fellow Abrahamic monotheists. instead they embrace this tribalism, but with a left-wing approach, which to me is extremely problematic. I am totally supportive of the idea of religious freedom. Religious freedom goes two ways. Religious freedom doesn't mean that a country has to be like France or Turkey or all the communist countries where religion is squelched and religion is taken out of the public sphere. Religious freedom is a Jeffersonian ideal, the American ideal of religious freedom, where you are free to be religious, you are free to be any type of religion, including, and by the American approach to religious freedom, atheism should have an equal standing among any other religion. Meaning, to be an atheist, that's just another religion. And there are the organized atheists and there are the non-organized atheists. I mean, you have groups like what do they call it? Society for Ethical Culture or something like that, where they have the trappings and the fellowship of going to church, or the humanist Judaism, whatever, that they embrace that fellowship of church, synagogue, without having a supernatural belief. And they recognize the value of fellowship. They recognize the value of ethics. They recognize the value of morals. Obviously, there's still something lacking there from my perspective as a religious person who believes in God. But I can embrace the fact that that is just another religion, just like any other religion, and should be treated just like we treat any other religion. But it shouldn't have primacy, and that's the problem in countries like France and Turkey and the communist countries and so forth, where they give primacy to atheism. In America, we have an establishment clause that prevents the establishment of an official church religion, including atheism. Meaning atheism is the official state religion, the official state church of China, let's say. And they reluctantly allow, certain religious groups to exist with license and so forth. Like someone told me, he when he was a kid, his grandfather brought him to synagogue, and his grandfather got arrested for it in Russia. Because it's one thing if the old people want to be religious, but you can't corrupt the youth and make them religious. And so his grandfather went to jail for bringing his grandchild as a child to a small, somewhat secret underground synagogue. And in a way, that's what the left would like to see. The left would like to see the banning of religion. And that's a problem. Meaning, when we talk to the New Israel Fund, and they want to talk about freedom, that the reform and the conservative and so forth should be welcome in Israel, just like anybody else. I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that, and I don't think the government should be supporting one religion over another. Whereas in so much of the world, the government runs the religion, and I don't like that. It's weird to me. I mean, you're free to choose whatever religion, but the government has to support it. In America, it's not like that. It's a free market. Right, I'm here at work, and so, you know, when the New Israel Fund says we want to ban segregated buses in Israel because segregated buses don't belong in a modern society. And the question is, well, who is segregating? Is the government segregating, or are the people choosing to self-segregate? And so in Israel, and even in certain places in America, there are gender-segregated buses. And the thing is the women want the segregation just as much as the men want the segregation. And they're free to leave if they don't want that, you know, meaning that's the problem that I have with the New Israel Fund, is that they don't have tolerance for the ultra-Orthodox. Meaning, I believe the ultra-Orthodox should be treated like everyone else. I don't believe they should get anything special that anyone else is not getting, but if they're giving stuff to everybody else, so then whatever they get, it's also fair for them to ask for. You know, that's the argument that many religious people in Israel have. Well, the government is paying for, you know, baseball and museums and, you know, all of these type of things, that, you know, movies and whatever that I'm not interested in. So why can't they pay for the stuff that I, as a citizen who pays taxes and so forth, you know, could have those same things, you know, which, you know, that I can agree with to a certain extent, but I think, you know, the government shouldn't be paying for baseball and art museums and so forth, you know. All right, we don't really have time to discuss this more. I'm here at work now. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, and take care.